We have here a story about future president of the United States, Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Here comes Ron.
Yeah.
People have written him off this cycle, but don't sleep on Ron. He's catching up. So he's gotten back to what he does best, culture war in his own state. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs bill that bans children under 14 from having social media accounts. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill on Monday that will prohibit children younger than 14 from joining social media in the state. Those who are 14 or 15 will need a parent's consent before they join a platform. The bill, HB 3, also directs social media company to delete the existing accounts of those who are under 14. Companies that fail to do so could be sued on behalf of the child who creates an account on the platform. The minor could be awarded up to $10,000 in damages, according to the bill. Companies found to be in violation of the law would also be liable for up to $50,000 per violation, as well as attorney's fees and court costs. DeSantis previously vetoed a more restrictive version of the bill that would have banned social media accounts for kids under 16. That bill also required Florida residents to submit an ID or other identifying materials in order to join social media. HB 3, which is slated to take effect in January 2025, comes as efforts to regulate social media continue to ramp up across the U.S. amid concerns from some parents that the platforms don't do enough to keep their kids safe online. In December, more than 200 organizations sent a letter urging Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to schedule a vote on the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, which seeks to create liability or a duty of care for apps and online platforms that recommend content to minors that can negatively affect their mental health. In January, lawmakers grilled CEOs from TikTok, X, and Meta about online child safety. The tech executives reaffirmed their commitment to child safety and pointed to various tools they offer as examples of how they are proactive about preventing exploitation online. Florida House Speaker Paul Renner and other advocates of the new law argue that social media use can harm children's mental health and can lead to sexual predators communicating with minors. Quote, "You will not find a line in this bill that addresses good speech or bad speech because that would violate the First Amendment," Renner said. "We've not addressed that at all. What we have addressed is the addictive features that are at the heart of why children stay on these platforms for hours and hours on end." He specifically called out net choice, saying we're going to beat them and we're never, ever going to stop. Okay. Now, nobody would argue that children should be allowed to buy cigarettes or that children should be allowed to buy alcohol. Now, what the media is very often pumping out when it comes to protection of children, and you'll hear this if you have the misfortune to talk to a lot of libs, very often when you bring up the protection of children, they've been programmed now to respond with this very rote, well, children are very often used as an excuse for a moral panic. Okay, sure. But sometimes children are being talked about because they're actually in danger, right? Right? There have been a lot of like child labor, right? Would you say that was a moral panic? The movement against children working in the mines, was that a moral panic? So sometimes when people talk about children, it's not a moral panic. They're actually trying to protect children. So is there any basis for claiming that children shouldn't be on social media? Yes, actually. Yes, there is. That's the science that liberals are supposed to be so fond of. Social media can alter children's brains and impact mental health. This is a neuroscientist, and there have been many other studies like this. Neuroscientist Emma Durden says social media can alter children's brains and have negative impacts on their mental health. Quote, social media can impact the developing brain in very specific ways, Durden told CTV News Channel on Friday. We know social media can act on the brain's stress response system, but also the reward system of the brain. Durden is an assistant professor at Western University and the Canada Research Chair in Neuroscience and Learning Disorders. Her research has found links between screen time and negative internalizing behaviors that can lead to stress and anxiety in children. Quote, the screen is changing all the time, especially if they're sitting in classrooms where they're constantly getting notifications. That habitual checking has actually been associated with specific changes in brain regions involved in fear and anxiety in teenagers, so it's very concerning. Durden explained how social media use can also release the neurochemical dopamine into the brain. Associated with pleasure, dopamine can be triggered by activities like enjoying music and taking drugs. While we normally don't experience this kind of rush constantly in our everyday lives, social media can create a steady stream of rewarding feelings. Quote, that's where it's becoming really concerning for children, where they're on these apps, they're posting images, they're commenting on images, and they're often seeking validation, Durden added. They can be spending a lot of time online and avoiding in-person social interactions, which can lead to loneliness and social isolation and could really underlie some of the mental health concerns associated with using social media. So to me, this is a no-brainer. This should not even be controversial. And it's also, if you look at how China has handled this, this is a really interesting example of where capitalism is not always best equipped, or maybe very often not best equipped, certainly Boeing is an example, to protect its citizens from harm, because there is this profit motive. And the question is America going to sacrifice the mental and psychological health of its children in order to protect the profits of Facebook and X and other social media companies? Because that's really what this comes down to. It is clearly damaging to children and teenagers to be exposed to social media. So you know what China did about it? They stopped it. Now, I believe it's under 8. You're not allowed to use your phone more than 40 minutes a day. Under 18, I believe it's 2 hours a day. No use between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That sounds about right to me. Like, they saw that this is damaging their children, and because of the kind of society they have, they were able to put a stop to it. Now, I have had my critiques of the Chinese system, as many people know, but I think that's an interesting example of where capitalism really just doesn't work. It doesn't work, because this is going to, maybe eventually they will pass a nationwide law like this once enough damage has been done. But by then, you're going to have a generation that is permanently neurologically impaired because we didn't want to interfere with Silicon Valley profits. Keaton?
Well, yeah, and I think the other component to this too, because the concern about, whether this is a speech issue, obviously, you're talking about kids. So, kids don't obviously children don't have the same rights as adults because they are under the supervision of adults. But I ultimately think if this were to be broadened out, would actually make social media platforms a lot freer, because so many of the rules on social media have to do with content aimed at or produced by kids. If you feature children in a video, or you show a picture of someone else's kid, I know on YouTube, something like 80% of YouTube censorship is around their child endangerment rule,
Right.
which, yeah, they catch a lot of weirdos posting weird shit about kids, but they also catch a lot of content that's really not harmful to kids that they will censor because it falls under that umbrella in the mind of whoever happened to be working that day. Right. And so if you just make it a sort of child-free environment, then you would obviously, it would stands to reason, a lot of those rules would no longer exist anymore, and you'd actually have a freer space. So YouTube has its own YouTube Kids app that you could install, and that's only child-friendly stuff on there, so kids can use that if they want to watch something, on the show. But to actually section it off and say, okay, we operate on this platform, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, under the premise that only people of a certain age are on here in the first place, well, that allows you to operate much more freely on that site because you don't have to necessarily worry as much, not nearly to the same extent that you do now. Is a child going to be exposed to this content? Because according to the rules, the children shouldn't be there anyway. So the people who are there get to operate a lot freer, right? If you go to a dive bar or, a bar where they card people at the door and it's only 21-year-olds can get in, that bar is a lot more fun than a bar than, TGI Fridays where you got families in there and people have to watch what they do and watch what they say, right? The bar that cards people is always a freer environment for those who get in, right? Than the ones where, you have, families eating there. And so same kind of thing. I think ultimately it'll be good for the sites themselves.
Yeah, this doesn't even go as far as I would go. Like, I would go China with this. Like, yeah, under 18, very limited use. And if they get parental consent, they can use it. What was that, at 14? Well, once they're 14, 15? I can't remember.
Yeah, once they're 15, it's with a parent's permission. Right, exactly, yeah.
Right. So at that point, I mean, I don't even see what the objection would be. Even if you feel like that should be up to the parents, which I don't. We don't feel it's up to the parents whether the kid has cigarettes, right? I mean, this is something that has been proven to cause neurological damage. I mean, let's be honest. Maybe I'm sure we have some people in the audience who have not really known or can not really remember a world without social media. But anyone who's old enough to have lived in a world without smartphones, yeah, man, it's fucking with your brain. You can tell. You can tell the difference. It's harder to concentrate on a very dense novel. And that's for somebody who didn't grow up with it. I mean, for me, I'm a reader, and it's harder for me to really concentrate on very dense material than it used to be because, you know what? Unless I put my phone somewhere, I'm looking at it. Because your brain has been trained that way. And I didn't grow up with that. I grew up without smartphones where I read all the time, and it's much harder to read now. So I can only imagine what this is doing to people who have never even known a world without that technology, who are growing up with it. And this isn't just anecdotal, as we showed. Scientifically, it is messing with the brain structure of kids. So to me, I don't even know what there's a debate about. Of course, I mean, what could be more vital than to make sure children's neurological development is not impaired over the course of their development? You have to protect children from that. So I would go to where China went. I think this bill is actually rather mild. I don't even know why there'd be a debate about it. I don't know why anyone would attack it.
You know what my theory is that there's a huge crash coming. It's coming. And so I'm putting my money into precious metals, mostly gold. And so I have a substantial percentage of my retirement in gold. And my financial future is secure with gold and silver. That's why I decided to sponsor, and I partnered with Colonial Metals Group. They helped me set up a safe and secure self-directed IRA where I have access to my assets no matter what the stock market, or for that matter, whatever the government's doing. I have access to it, and plus I got it in gold coins. Okay, so let the team of experts at Colonial Metals Group help you protect your family's future. We put together a special offer. Listen to this offer. You click on the link in the description of this video or call the special 800 number, and you're going to receive a safe and up to $10,000 in free silver. I don't know how they could do that, but go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Jimmy Dore Show. colonialmetals.com/Jimmy-Dore-Show. Or you can call 888-910-1419. That's 888-910-1419. And a nice person like our friend Paul from Colonial, he'll tell you all about it. I had lunch with Paul. When he explained all this to me, I was like, hey, I'd like to work with you guys. And I'd like to put my retirement money in an IRA account with you guys with the precious metals. So go to 888-910-1419. That's Colonial Metals. Or you can go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Jimmy-Dore-show. Or click the link in the description. Hey, there's still tickets available in Stockholm, Oslo, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Edmonton, Alberta, Vancouver, British Columbia, Denver, Ashland, Virginia, and Athens, Georgia. See you there.